All right, I think we have everybody in from the waiting room, Adriana, yes? All right, fantastic. Well, let me first start by welcoming everyone. We are so pleased to have you here. Our format today will be talking just a little bit about our special issue come up. We'll introduce our panelists and we'll hear some fantastic overviews about different topics that are near and dear to each of them. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So please feel free to share any questions in chat that you might like the panelists to address afterwards, and we'll circle back to that. So again, thank you everyone so much for joining us. This is our second part of exploring systemic issues facing the biomedical research training community. And what we hope to address today is more focused on the programming and resources that are available to nudge that systemic change that we are, I think, all here to hear about and learn more about how we can each contribute to and how some of our panelists are doing that already. So first, I'd like to just welcome each of our panelists. We'll be hearing from Dr. Sherilynn Black, who's an Associate Vice Provost from Faculty Advancement and Assistant Professor of the Practice of Medical Education at Duke University. She also is a scholar, a CIMER Master Facilitator and Curriculum Developer, and a co-chair of the National Academy's Roundtable on Mentorship, Professional Development, and Well-Being. We're excited to hear from JP Flores, who is a PhD candidate here at UNC Chapel Hill, and also the podcast and host and founder of a podcast called From Where Does It Stem? We're excited to have Danielle Williams joining us as well, also a PhD candidate here at UNC. We're excited to hear from her about wellness, and particularly she's also the author of The Mindful PhD, a journal for and by a PhD, talking about that journey and how to support PhDs. I'm really excited to have her joining us as well. Dr. Anna Hahn, Chief Scientific Diversity Officer at the National Eye Institute and former Senior Advisor for Social and Behavioral Sciences in the Office of Intramural Training and Education at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Tammy Collins, who is the Program Officer at Burroughs Wellcome Fund and former Director of the Office of Fellows and Career Development in the National Institutes of Environmental and Health Sciences. Dr. Tien, who is both a consultant, community-centered and virtual learning consultant through Nyan Education and Workforce Consulting, as well as former Associate Dean at Washington University in St. Louis, as well as creator of Intersect Job Sims. And Dr. Caleb McKinney, Associate Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Training and Development, Assistant Vice President of Master's Program Administration and Development, and Associate Professor of Rehabilitation Medicine at Georgetown University Medical Center. So again, we're really looking forward to hearing about all of them on their vision and current work around systemic change in biomedical workforce. Before we do that, we did want to take just a moment to address questions from any of you who may be considering contributing to our Frontier special issue. So just to briefly touch on that before we jump into our main portion here, if you are interested and you don't already have an invitation, please contact Adriana or myself. Our emails are listed in the sign up here as well, and we'll add them in the chat. And either of us can add you as a potential contributor. If you would like to do that, our abstracts are due, which will just give an overview of your work. It's called a summary for Frontiers. Those will be due by May 1st. And then your full manuscripts would be due by August 1st. If you're not sure if something you have is a good fit or a good project, please reach out to either of us and we'd be happy to talk through that with you. We are hoping that this is part of a broader initiative, and we hope to see many in the future to create a cascading avalanche, a waterfall, if you will, of biomedical workforce education, training, empirically developed, tested programs, systems, issues, policy pieces in how we can all address systemic change. And so if you have something that you think might be a good fit, please reach out. We hope to highlight early faculty career workforce development. We hope to highlight graduate and postdoctoral training issues. We hope to highlight issues that may impact different communities in the biomedical workforce differently. So if those or anything related is something that you'd be interested in contributing, again, we encourage you to think about doing that and be happy to talk to anyone who would like to learn more. And so with that, I want to pause for one moment. If there's any questions regarding the Frontier submission, please do add those in the chat, and we will have a Q&A time at the very end to address any issues that come up. We did want to emphasize just a couple of things before we dive into our panel. As with many journals, there are APC charges. We do not expect authors ever to need to pay that out of pocket. If this is your first time addressing that or you haven't done it before, we are happy to help you troubleshoot, whether that be through grant funding, institutional funding. There are options to submit for free if you or one of your co-authors is a partner institution of the Frontiers Consortium, similar to many open access journals that offer that type of option. And you can also apply for a waiver. So we do not want fees, APC fees, to be a barrier for anyone. So again, please reach out if you think you have something but aren't sure how to go about that. Our peer review process will be going on during August. So once you submit, for those who are less familiar with open access journals, it is a very highly interactive peer review process where you'll hear back from people matched with your field of expertise, and then you'll be able to respond to each critique. And then ultimately, when you get that peer review feedback, address your manuscript changes, resubmit a new version. And then once you have agreement from all of your reviewers or enough of your reviewers that it is considered fully passing peer review, then it becomes indexed and peer reviewed after that point. So it's a little bit of a different model. Again, please feel free to reach out if you do have any questions about that. And Adriana and I are happy to answer that. And lastly, before we jump in, I want to thank so much my co-editor and co-conspirator in crime, Dr. Adriana Bankston, who's here on the call today as well. She has been instrumental and fantastic in helping set everything up, keeping us organized, and this truly would not be possible without her. So with that, I'm going to leave our panel visual up here in the background as our panelists do a brief introduction, and then we'll switch back to just seeing our faces while we talk through the rest of it. So with that, I'd love to start with Dr. Sherilynn Black, if you will, take it away.
Thank you so much, Beka, and thank you everyone for having us today. I was asked to give just a bit of an overview to kick things off, talking about some of the things that are happening more broadly with the Academy, and then giving you a few examples of the work that I do to sort of frame what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll just start out by saying that I'm a neuroscientist. I'm faculty in the School of Medicine at Duke University. I'm also the Associate Vice Provost for Faculty Advancement. And I started out my leadership work when I started sort of getting more interested in the ideas around systemic change by working in graduate education. And so at that time, I founded an office called the Office for Biomedical Graduate Diversity. It's now called the Ideals Office at Duke University. And also founded what's called the Duke BioCorps program, which is an IMSD program that was designed to bring excellent scholars from underrepresented backgrounds into different STEM disciplines. What I learned from all of that work was that there's so much that we could pour into individuals that are in the system who make up the groups that the Academy was not designed to support in the first place. So we think about lots of programs and opportunities to build different skills and facets of those individuals. But more and more, as I sort of gained skills and understanding of the way that the Academy worked, I felt very compelled to think more about how to change the system itself. Because what I realized was that if the barriers in the system were never broken, we would constantly be putting out fires and putting Band-Aids on situations that were never designed for the success of the groups that were in it. So as I moved up to the Provost office and became Associate Vice Provost, I started working much more intentionally on thinking about how to change the system. And I've done that in a number of ways. As a scientist, I'm very interested in understanding how to use data to change structures and policies and infrastructure. I've done a lot of work at the national level. And some of the areas that I will talk about over the next few minutes are things that I think that many of you will be able to participate in if you're interested. So one of the things that I did was to look for different national partners who are interested in doing evidence-based, data-driven, rigorous work and thinking about notions of things like race and equity in the Academy were creating inequities that were preventing the system from moving forward. One of the ways that I did that was by being selected to be on the National Academy's consensus study for revitalizing graduate education, and then again for the National Academy's Committee on Racism and Healthcare Professionals Education. And now I am serving as a co-chair of the National Academy's Roundtable for Mentorship, Professional Development, and Well-Being. And a big part of that work is bringing together scholars from all over the country, like all of you who are listening today, to think with the most innovative and creative lens about how do we change systems? How do we understand to be leaders in the spaces that we all currently occupy without maybe perhaps not holding a named leadership position? Maybe we're still in a training environment. Maybe we're a faculty running a lab. Maybe we are a scholar writing a book. How do we use the agency and influence that we have to identify those barriers and change them? And how do we do it in a way that is holistically minded where each person in the Academy can thrive? So a lot of the work that I'm doing with the National Academies right now focuses on those sorts of questions and really use this data to help us breed more innovative and thoughtful ways to approach those efforts so that as we think about resources and infrastructure allocation, we can use those in ways that will be effective to move the system forward. Another way that I have been able to be involved in thinking about systemic change is through reimagining theoretical frameworks with a lens of equity in mind. So for much of the work that we do right now, especially for individuals who sort of bring their lived experience to this space, there may be challenges sometimes creating interventions that are actually successful and align with the outcomes that we seek. And a big part of that is typically because there's not the marrying of thinking about social sciences and theoretical frameworks with interventions and programs and initiatives and outcomes that may be implemented at institutions and government agencies and different societies around the world. So what I like to do is look at the theoretical frameworks and understand how to overlay the specific variables and interventions that are relevant for moving the system forward. So reimagining what those frameworks can look like, overlaying an equity-minded lens, and understanding how to align that to the questions that are most pressing for how the academy is operating day to day. So as we think about the issues that are most impactful for students, for postdocs, for faculty, we can then take back some of those theoretical frameworks to help us understand what are the most important parts of the context, what are the resources we have, what are the interventions we can design, and how can we assess the outcomes to make sure that they're successful. And the final thing that I'll mention is always constantly thinking about how to intervene on leaders themselves. I think a lot of times when we think about systemic change, we think about it from the ground up because students are so highly activated, which is amazing. And we also think about a lot of things that we can tell people who are underrepresented in the system and from underrepresented groups about ways that they can better navigate a system that's inequitable. An approach that I've taken over the last several years with support from Howard Hughes Medical Institute, who is funding a lot of this work, is creating curricula for leaders to understand what it actually means to engage in equity-minded leadership, how to make sure that we're facilitating environments where all of the great initiatives that you'll hear about from the rest of the panelists will be able to thrive and succeed because the foundation and the framework has been laid out from that leader to be able to engage in that work. Similarly, for faculty to have that responsibility over their own training environments to make sure that they are literate and competent in areas discussing things about race, gender identity, some of the other issues that are going on in the world right now. And also making sure that trainees understand how they themselves can be leaders, can be a part of the change that they want to seek, and understanding how to bring that forward into their future careers. So hopefully that has given you a bit of an idea to see that from the scholarly lens, from the intervention lens, from the programmatic lens, there are many ways that we can all get involved in this work. I'm happy to talk more about any of the things that I've done, but I want to turn it over now to my fellow panelists who are going to give some specific examples of some of the interventions that they've developed and how they're moving those forward in their institutions.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Sherilynn. And what a great introduction to what is going to be a really robust discussion. Next up, we're going to hear from JP Flores, who is one of our early career scientists, and feel free to jump on in, JP.
Yeah, first off, thank you all for allowing me to be on this panel. I don't really know how to follow up, Sherilynn. That was amazing, but I'll do my best crack at it. Yeah, as Beka mentioned, my name is JP Flores. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a third-year PhD candidate at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, and went to Occidental College. It's a very social justice-centric liberal arts school, and there I helped create a class called Broader Impacts of Biology, in which we had discussions about social injustice and systemic issues in STEM and medicine. A part of that class was to actually develop a project for the broader public. So some peers of mine, they were creating curriculums for middle and high schools. I decided to create a podcast where I interview scientists from all over the world and ask them about their scientific and personal journeys. It won a Spotify award in 2021, and it has drastically influenced a lot of the way I think about science today. And it's really helped me, realize the importance of bridging science and society. So in addition to pursuing my PhD here at UNC, I'm also doing a certificate program called Innovation for the Public Good, where I'm taking design thinking and system thinking classes. And I've been really impacted by the idea of designing solutions for those at the margins, with the idea that these solutions can be extended to many. So I've been working on applying this knowledge in my social justice efforts as well as my science. And I think a lot of this work needs to be done, from a multi-pronged approach. So for example, I'm part of many national grassroots organizations in an effort to work bottom up, specifically in issues such as mentorship, recruitment, and retention. But I've also continued to try and find ways to change systems from the top down. So right now, I'm actually a science policy intern in the Office of Science Policy in the Office of the Director at the NIH. And specifically for this piece with Frontiers, my pitch really is to take the more than 80 conversations I've had on my podcast, gather the transcripts, and conduct a content analysis to try and pull out general themes that keep popping up in my conversations. These conversations have included high school students, undergrads, grad students, postdocs, faculty members, and even outside of academia, so directors such as Francis Collins, the NSF director, president of the National Academies, et cetera. I've chatted with editors such as the editor-in-chief of Science, personnel in the Office of the White House, Science, Technology, and Policy team, and even prominent science communicators. One thing I want to note is all these conversations have an element of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And the plan, again, is to pull out recurring themes that may contribute to potential barriers to inclusion for scientists at all levels and even beyond. So I'm trying to write about possible recommendations to start chipping away or breaking down these barriers, particularly for underrepresented folks. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, JP, for sharing that. And we certainly look forward to hearing more about your conclusions when you've done that analysis and hear some of the recommendations that might emerge from those conversations. Thank you. All right. Danielle Williams, we're excited to hear about more on the wellness journey around creating a better way for scientists to interface with what can be really stressful. And Danielle is also a nationally renowned and sought out speaker on these topics and runs workshops and does evidence-based work both in the scholarly literature as well as her book, which she has authored, in providing ways to support PhD trainees throughout their scientific journey. So with that, I pass it off to you, Danielle.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Beka, for that very kind introduction. Again, my name is Danielle Williams. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate here at UNC. I'm most excited, as Beka mentioned, about developing evidence-based interventions to increase well-being among PhD students. And so in 2022, I wrote and self-published a mindfulness journal specifically for doctoral students. This journal was based on my own mental health challenges as a postbac, where I found journaling and mindfulness practices to be the most effective at managing my mental health, but also increasing my overall well-being in a space where the stress is really high. And so this journal was created with MBSR, or mindfulness-based stress reduction, as the foundation, which is an evidence-based practice typically used in a clinic. And so initially it was based on my own research, but as the journal sort of grew into an official book, I consulted with individuals in counseling and psychological services here at UNC, just to make sure that the information was correct and it could be broadly used without being triggering for majority of individuals. And since launching the journal, I've developed an evidence-based mindfulness workshop series in collaboration with Zoe Silverman here at UNC. She sees the PhD students within BVSP. And the basis of this workshop series is rooted in empirical evidence for practicing self-compassion and its efficacy in reducing anxiety and depression. In this workshop series, we also cover healthy coping mechanisms, self-care, and give students tools to be able to define and redefine their why throughout their doctoral journey. And last summer, we were approved for an IRB to collect pre and post workshop survey data to see, at least in the short term, if participants are able to increase their proficiency in some of the concepts that are covered. And so far, we do see significant outcomes in students' confidence in their ability to show themselves compassion, to show others compassion, and being able to manage and manage their stress in a healthy way. As Beka mentioned, I've given this workshop nationally as well, and so I'm working with collaborators at UT Dallas to publish some of this preliminary work. Overall, I'm really excited about these types of interventions, specifically mindfulness interventions, because they can use what students already have. So it's more of an asset-based approach. Students have access to themselves and being able to build on the relationship with themselves. It doesn't cost anything to have compassion. And so that doesn't require a significant amount of time, which we're short on, nor does it require a significant amount of money. And so, as I mentioned, I'm excited about these at the graduate student level because it's where I have the most agency currently, but I hope to continue this work and implement change at the systemic level as well. I've got some ideas about interventions to cultivate compassionate lab culture and possibly develop curriculum around compassionate mentorship in the academic space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Danielle. What wonderful thoughts about what you're already doing and what you aspire to do in the future. And I can't wait to see how those continue to evolve. Thank you so much again. All right, Dr. Anna Hahn will be following up on our conversation about wellness, as well as supporting trainees from the margins, which I think has already kind of been a theme that's been kind of running throughout the panel. And she especially has been working on resiliency. And so with that, both nationally at the OITE level, as well as with intramural trainees, and now also is working with a diversity lens. So I'm going to pass it on to you to hear more about your fantastic work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Anna Hahn. I am Scientific Diversity Officer for the National Eye Institute here at the NIH. But formally, as Beka said, I was in the Office of Intramural Training and Education, overseeing and advising a lot of the social behavioral components. So before I guess I go in further, people want to know, what do you know about resiliency and all these psychological effects? Just to let you know, I am a social cognitive psychologist by training. I was a former associate professor of psychology, and my work really focused on some of these resiliency and then in terms of diversity around how to measure implicit and explicit biases. So just giving you some background. And I want to tie into some earlier panelists. As Dr. Black said earlier, we have a broken system. We need to fix it from top down. I think JP also addressed that. We need to do that quickly, but things are moving a little slower than we want to. And while we, while we are working on fixing the system, we really need to provide some tools for the trainees, right? Kind of intervention for them to navigate the tricky environment so we can have all of our bright minds be their best selves along the way. So not just a subset that we've been recruiting from. So along with caring for mental health, as Danielle mentioned, we really need to focus on another tool in the tool bag that's been really effective is resilience. And we don't seem to talk about it enough. So we know from research that people who are resilient are better able to regulate their behavior and avoid self-defeating behaviors. And you can, define them multiple ways, including procrastination. They also have more optimistic outlook on life, which leads to more positive self-views. They're less likely to be depressed and anxious. And when they do become depressed and anxious, they can just cope with it better. And all of that seems to also result better in increased work performance. So the really good news here is that resilience can be learned and nurtured. It can be translated also into various other aspects of life, not just science. So these skills can be transferred to personal life, navigating friendship and family relationships. So I know I said resilience a lot. What do I mean by resilience? I'm just going to briefly use the American psychological definition, which is really adapting well in the face of adversity or significant source of stress. So it just means bouncing back from difficult experiences. And I want to make this extremely clear. This is not about persisting no matter what, right? It's also knowing when to call it quits, right? But it's really shifting and pivoting and adjusting when needed and adapting and bouncing back. I really just like the term bouncing back. And all of this kind of thought came about in 2020 with the beginning of the pandemic, when we started to really think about how do we help trainees. So we were getting a lot of kind of desperate calls when the COVID started, trainees who are struggling. And all of this came about because trainee had asked us, can you help us do X, Y, and Z? And the intervention was started, not by me, by Dr. Sherilynn, the Director of Office of Intramural Training Education. And it became this 5-part series we call Becoming a Resilient Scientist. It's a 5-part, 2-hour workshop with 1-hour facilitated discussion. And we loosely use this as a form of a kind of intervention, but it overlaps a lot with what Daniel was talking about. Just basic emotional skills, just tools to help trainees cope. So we talk about well-being practices that the motto is you must be well to do well. So you need to engage in self-care, mindfulness, journaling, seeking community support. But we also address countering cognitive distortions, things like catastrophizing, imposter fears, strategies, like specific strategies, and how do you address some of this? And how to combat some of the negative self-talk we engage in. I know the academics, all of you in the room can probably a million times in a day, you may engage in this negative self-talk. So how do you counter that? And then we went on to talk about self-advocacy, when to be assertive and advocate for yourself, how to set boundaries, right? Turns out that's incredibly important. When to say no. Yes, you can say no to your PI. You can say no to, right, an authority figure. And increasing feedback resilience. So when people give you difficult feedback, how do you engage? How do you also give others feedback, and kind of managing up? And just to note, none of these skills are brand new. This has been in the literature for a long, long time. We just happened to bring them in one place and just kind of gave a lecture and have trainees talk about it. And what we found at the end, when we measured the improvement, we actually found at the end of 6 months, the trainees did increase their resilience on a resilience, kind of the resilience scale. They report having reduced perceived stress, reduced anxiety, and they have significantly increased their adaptability and self-awareness. So like, what are they doing? What kind of self-talk are they engaging in? And all question. Okay. All of this was mediated by increase in resilience. So just to note, these effects were greater for marginalized trainees. And we think this happens because trainees now get validation that what they're experiencing, they're not on their own. Others are also experiencing this. Others recognize this. Others are also working on these issues. And it seemed to, right, but it only seemed to be effective, not surprising, for those who are committed and who attend. So what we did is we did have quite a bit of attrition, trainees who would come periodically and not attend consistently. When we reached out and asked them why, they said, oh, I don't think my PI or my supervisor would like it. They don't like me being gone for 2 hours during the day. And knowing, right, these important skills they're learning, how it will help them down the road, we thought, wow, this is just really culture of science needs to be changed, right? So this is where I want to wrap up and say we need to really focus on essential. So I'm going to say mental and resiliency skills, not just science. Yes, science is important, but really first we need to lay down the foundation of these essential skills. And I want to argue that these essential skills should be grad school 101 or maybe even undergrad 101. So this, right, the importance of kind of laying the foundation before we ask trainees to take on these larger, bigger scientific burdens. So I'm going to stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much helping us explore some other tools that we can continue to add to the toolkit to hopefully help, like you said, counter some of those influences that we hope to change with systemic change, but it might take some time. And I know that you haven't mentioned this yet, but I also know that you guys are training faculty on how to help support and build resiliency in their own trainees to kind of create that systemic change more broadly. So maybe we'll circle back to that in the Q&A later, but thank you so much for that wonderful overview. Up next, we'll hear from Dr. Tammy Collins, who has kind of a dual hat and has done a lot of thinking about how to use data to inform changes in policy and changes that will benefit trainees and program development along the way. And so as a published author and someone who has run training programs, developed curricula, and is also now on the funding side of the house where systemic change can come by resource development and how you frame things and what you offer. She has a really broad array of experiences, which we're excited to hear about. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Tammy.
Hey, thank you so much, Beka. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak and also for organizing this panel. So I've been at Bros Welcome Fund now for the past 1.5 years. And prior to that, I spent a decade at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, directing our training program there. And I wore a wide multitude of hats, but really my passion project centered around collecting data with the ultimate goal of even using it to answer basic questions, as well as hopefully also being able to use it to advocate for change. And the data I'm talking about is career outcomes data. And I always remember back when I first started at NIHS, I was an office of one, and I would get asked by a range of all different kinds of people, where do our scholars go after they leave? And I had absolutely no clue. I couldn't answer this whatsoever. And I really wanted to set out to change this. And I say but it wasn't just me. This was really an effort of a multitude of people, including Hangju, Shyamal Padada, Greg Buckhold, Richard Gilliam. So a combination of computer scientists, biostatisticians, and even summer students working together on this project. So just wanted to give the credit to them. But just to kind of like take you through a little bit of how this project even came about. So really starting from the ground up was the basic, Google sleuthing to find out what people were doing from publicly available data. And we realized, we've got this data and it's like, how do we even make sense of it? And so we started to think about how we could categorize it and bend it into certain fields in order to use it to tell a story. And so we wound up coming up with a taxonomy in which we term it from the ground up, because we did it after we're looking at what people were doing and thinking about how to categorize it. And so we were asking, where are they going? What type of job are they in? And what are they doing in that job? And so we assigned them a job sector, a job type, and then job specifics. And, aside from that, we wanted to extend beyond the basic data and also think about how to tell stories through effective visualizations. I'm not going to get into all the details of those outcomes, but they will be posted in the chat and available. But we wound up publishing a paper highlighting some of the factors associated with the career outcomes. One of the things that also really stood out is how much the influence of location of training played a part. And how it varied based on whether you were a US versus international fellow, and how it varied based on whether you were going into an academic tenure track like position or a for-profit professional staff position. And related to this project and all the resources we provided therein, I collaborated with a team of many volunteers from the Graduate Career Consortium. I think it was 16 or 17 people, some of which I see online today. And this was a group of termed the PhD Outcomes Committee at the time. And we developed a comprehensive resource that outlined the landscape of classification and taxonomic tools, as well as a crosswalk analysis that showed equivalencies between the different classification systems. And then as well, we highlighted a wide variety of visualization methodologies. And our goal was to have everything all in one place to make it easier for those who wanted to be able to tell these stories. If they were going to embark on this effort, have everything listed in one place. So, let's say, for example, you might want to tell the story of how, more people are going into careers in a for-profit company, so your institution needs to provide more support for broader career training. Or maybe, you're seeing similar things that we've seen associated with other institutions about how people are entering into careers in the local area. And so using this to advocate for more resources to connect with the local employers and develop relationships with alumni, which could also even turn around to, in turn, bolster your own programs, as well as possibly a donor relationship. Or it might be the story of how significantly less women or less minoritized scientists are entering into the careers that they originally set out to do, such as a tenure track like position. And so this could factor into the data that you're using to advocate for change in changing the system, so that you can support all scholars to enter into the careers that they want to enter into. And, just kind of hearkening back to when Sherilynn opened all of this up, talking about data, I just wanted to reiterate and stress the importance of gathering data and using it to advocate for change, especially in the biomedical research enterprise, where the language is built around data and the currency is often measured in publishing that data. And I also want to leave with a final example from my current position. So this is outside of career outcomes, but when I moved to Burroughs Wellcome Fund, one of the first things I saw is that I felt that we needed to increase our stipends for our postdocs through this program that I oversee that's similar to a K99 R00. It's called Career Awards at the Scientific Interface. And so what I did was just start collecting data and looking at the stipends we had been given, 20 years ago all the way to now, and plotting that and adjusting it to inflation and showing our board that just to be equivalent to what we were giving 20 years ago, we would need to be paying them between $75,000 to $79,000. And when you really present it in that way, it removes the notion of people saying, "Oh, that seems like a lot of money," or "Oh, I was only making 10 or 20,000 back in the day," because then you're bringing the data and showing, this is what it's equivalent to. And it ultimately resulted in our board approving actually stipend increases of between 80 and 85K, as well as 5,000 in childcare expenses. So, just wanted to encourage all of you out there to really think about collecting data, analyzing it, thinking about what needs to be changed and how you can visualize it to tell an effective story. And also that you don't have to do it alone. You can partner with students or scholars that are also passionate about your cause, faculty champions, professional society volunteers, and thinking about gathering the expertise that you need. I wanted to reiterate, I am not a data visualization expert. I don't really know how to use these systems, but I've partnered with people who are experts. And, if it wasn't for the whole village working together, we wouldn't have been able to done what we did. So, just wanted to leave you with that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tammy. And I will add that we will have resources. So anything you hear the panelists mention, we are taking note of in the background. And so some of those have been shared in chat. But we'll also be posting this video on our Adriana's YouTube channel later, which will be publicly available. And so if you'd like to access those resources, we will be embedding those links in the description, so you can feel free to access those there after the series. I was going to mention one other thing, but I forgot what it was, so that's okay. But thank you again, Tammy, for that wonderful. Oh, I know what it was. Tammy mentioned partnering. And so one thing, if you're thinking about being a contributor, definitely we recommend that you think about partnering with people. If you're like, well, I know a lot about X, but I don't know about Y. So whether that's partnering with someone who's a data visualization expert, a data analyst, an education researcher who may have more knowledge of theory, a social scientist, if you're working on equity and inclusion, who might be able to connect theories with some of your work or interventions. We encourage people to do that broadly, but also for the upcoming application cycle, if you are thinking about being a contributor, that would definitely be a strength to potential author teams. So just wanted to not forget to mention that. Thank you so much, Tammy. And with deep apologies, Dr. T-Yen is up next. And when I reformatted the slide, it deleted her picture. And I'm so sorry, T, for that slight. And we're so excited to have you here today. And just as a reminder, T's experience encompasses everything from program development and direction to at the highest levels of leadership in academia, to creating nationally utilized platforms and programs, including business and science, career development. She is active and has been active in many professional societies, including Graduate Career Consortium, and was a developer of the Intersect Job Simulation Board, which probably many of you or your trainees have used. And she now also is a consultant, in addition to many other hats she wears. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to T, and we're so excited to hear from you about what you're working on today now.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here and excited to join the conversation. And I really don't mind. It means everyone else's faces are shining a little bit brighter on the flyer, so it's all good. So I'm really delighted to talk about experiential learning programs and resources and what that means for systemic issues. And how I'll define experiential learning broadly is actually also talked about in this CBE Life Sciences paper that was co-authored by Beka in 2020. But they talk about 4 different experiential opportunities that are often used in the biomedical sciences that allow for graduate students, postdocs, even early faculty to experience a new work environment and the tasks that are involved and the people that they might work with. And a lot of people are working on this in terms of real employer visits, real internships, but also shorter experiences like job shadows and job simulations. And so this matters because creating these allows for these opportunities to be more accessible for people who may not know how to ask for these experiences, don't have the social capital to go on these experiences, or the funding or the timing, or even if there's visa restrictions. So it makes the idea of thinking about yourself in a new context more accessible. And it's also important to develop programs and resources for experiential learning, because mental health issues are endemic in academia. A large proportion of scientists report anxiety and depression for many reasons, like not having structured support, mentor-mentee relationships, and not knowing where they're going to go next, right? So it's important that we think about these. And a lot of the programs that the other panelists have talked about in terms of compassion, resilience, learning about what's out there and using data is important. So the way that you want to develop this on your campus, so the way that we think about it, is what Dr. Black said too, these interventions that you can create from the ground up to support the students and the postdocs right now, and also top down, like JP was talking about as well. How are we thinking about the policy level? So I'll share some examples. You don't have to necessarily create something new. You can work with what you have. And so partner with campus offices. One of the first programs that did this really well was Princeton's office. They created a university admins internship that put graduate students in doing tasks, short-term tasks, in lots of other offices, and got them paid for it. And that has since been duplicated at many universities, including whenever I was at WashU. And then what we added to that is that we helped connect graduate students with community leaders, those in Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and international-owned businesses, and finding that community, to being in the community and for the community, also allow them to align their personal values with their academic values. And so that was one way to do it. As programs are thinking about and propping up, there's a lot of really exciting movement in experiential learning, in project development, in business programs, in policy and advocacy, right? All the work that Adriana's doing. And that's really wonderful. And so I would encourage that as you're doing this, think about how you can connect it to an employer or an industry. The work that I do now is to connect it with true workforce. Academia to Industry, A2I is a great organization to look at for examples as well. I know they just had a gathering. GCC is really great, the Graduate Career Consortium, to look for examples. I've met so many wonderful collaborators and created so many resources together with them. I want to share a story about how, the power of one. And so whenever I was at WashU, we eventually helped the graduate school adapt a policy that required different departments. The students had to do a certain number of teaching experiences, but through a number of years, we were able to adapt that to be that students could do a number of mentored professional experiences, including teaching, so that they could work in a university office or at a community center outside the university. And that would count because it's the same thing. They're getting some experience, they're getting some feedback in it, they're developing a skill and a career they want to go to. So you're using the language and the structure, but kind of helping them see it in another way. And a lot of people think you need a lot of money in a program to get started, but you have one student in biomedical engineering who wanted to go work at this, mindfulness startup. So we set that up. And then another student, who saw that wanted to work in another startup. So we set them up there. And the next thing you know, it's not 3 students, it's 3 departments that are invested in it. And those 3 departments then, look to get, oh, wait, they're doing that? Well, we want to do that. And so really it is the power of 1 + 1 + 1. It's not linear. I've found it can be exponential. So celebrate the opportunity to develop these one-off opportunities for your students. I think work together. Policy is possible to change policy. And I would also say that the great thing about this is it's designed to, your experiential opportunities are just inherently designed to fit into graduate students, postdocs' busy schedules. And if you can, find ways to pay for time and labor. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, T. And Dr. Caleb McKinney, who again has had experience all the way from program development all the way to the highest leadership levels within academia, is a published scholar, as an advocate, and also has been focusing on interprofessional education, is going to give us a little bit of a snippet about some of the things he's passionate and working on now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, Caleb.
Fantastic. Thank you for that intro. And so just building upon T's remarks, I'll wrap us up here by discussing the need to contemporize training so that students and postdocs are actually better prepared to enter the diversity of careers available to them. That was just mentioned as some of the data collection efforts that Tammy just mentioned today. And so some of our work is aimed at Georgetown Medical Center is aimed at building upon career exploration toward career readiness. And so I want to take this remaining time to discuss one project that my team launched at Georgetown University that we're really proud of that I think begins to address this issue. The Academy for Transferable Management Skills, that I'll call ADAMS for the next few minutes, is an asynchronous course that we built out in Canvas that trains students and postdocs in the fundamentals of project management. And so the initial development of ADAMS was funded as a pilot by Burroughs Welcome Fund Career Guidance for Trainees grant that I received in 2019, a mechanism that I'm sure many of you are familiar with and have made your own transformative contributions to trainee professional development with. It was incredibly helpful for us to build out this program. And so we built out the curriculum and assignments with the consult of PhD scientists who work in various areas of industry with the idea that trainees would be learning project management principles in a way that they could take back to their actual research groups to not only improve their management of their research projects during their training, but also to be able to just tangibly show a skill that's ubiquitous across job sectors and build vernacular. We actually coined a term, integrated experiential learning, to describe this application of industry-based hard skills that we're training the students in to be able to apply to their current research projects. And so over the years, Liz Somm from my office has taken over managing ADAMS and has really transformed the program, integrating workshops, activities to bring the trainees together. We're finishing up a brief IRB-approved evaluative study of ADAMS and its impact on different project management competencies that the trainees may have gained throughout the program. And we hope that will be done this summer so that we can, so that work can be our frontier submission for the collection that Adriana and Beka are leading. In the meantime, we've already posted our whole curriculum on our website, and I'll put it in the chat in a minute so that other institutions can adopt parts of it for their own professional development offerings. We're really happy to see our colleagues at Georgia Tech integrated some of the ADAMS curriculum into one of their programs and had a really nice poster describing it at the National Postdoc Association conference a couple of weeks ago. So we were like, yes to dissemination, check. And so just speaking of MPA, just a short plug, because they're doing a lot of work to support professional development as well for postdocs. There's a program called the MPA Smart Skills course. That's a really great resource for professional skill development. So if your institution is a member of MPA, make sure your postdocs check that out. So the last thing I wanted to mention about ADAMS was our institutionalization. I don't know if that's a word, how we institutionalize the program, because as we all know, getting faculty buy-in for professional development activities for trainees can sometimes be an uphill battle. I initially got some buy-in from the beginning because we were designing ADAMS with a lot of input that we got from interviewing faculty, and I think they really appreciated playing a small part in the co-creation process. And as T mentioned, like you get champions across these departments, you can kind of transform culture that way. And so I was designing ADAMS while I was finishing a master's degree in design management and communication. So I was able to leverage the human-centered design thinking process. And we go into some detail around that in the materials that we posted on our website so you can get an idea of our design process. In recent years, some faculty have been integrating it as a requirement in their T32 training programs, the ADAMS program. As a result, as an example, I'm one of the PIs and co-directors of our IMSD predoctoral training program, which is focused on interprofessional, interdisciplinary training through the lens of improving scientific workforce diversity. And we have ADAMS formally integrated into our IMSD to prepare students for their required internships. And yes, we did stick an internship requirement into that PhD program, but we'll save that for a different presentation. As many of you all know, a footprint of institutional training grant programs can really transform the culture around training and professional development at your institution. So being able to integrate ADAMS as well as some of our other offerings into these mechanisms has been very helpful for scaling and institutionalizing our professional development activities. And so I'll stop there. Feel free to contact us if you have any follow-up questions. Our contact info is on our Georgetown Adams website. Oh, thanks, Chris. Put it in the chat. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Caleb. And thank you to all of our panelists. In our last 5 minutes, instead of doing an open Q&A, I'm going to ask each of you, and we're going to go in the same order. So Sherilynn, I'm going to start with you so you can think about it and let me know when you're ready. I'd like to ask each of you to share 2 nuggets. What's one thing you would recommend for trainees, whether that's grad students or postdocs? And what's one thing that you'd recommend for leaders based on your lens, the things you're passionate about, some of the things you talked about? If you only get one for each, one for trainees and one for faculty or leaders or administration, anybody who's on sort of the culture forming side. So Sherilynn, I'll give you a moment since we're starting with you and everybody else can think about it before we go around.
Yeah, and that's also the most impossible question ever to whittle down to one thing. But I think what I would probably say for all the trainees who are listening is understand what your values are and stay authentic to those as you advance in your career. That may sound like it's coming a bit out of left field, but I think that what I learned in my own career and in my ability to enact the kind of changes that I wanted to see, it's because I am consistently aligned with the things that I believe in, and I do my science in a way that contributes towards goals that I care about. And so I think that there can often be pressure to to sort of adhere to other norms and maintain status quo in ways that may not feel authentic to you. And I would never advocate for you to do that. We want to diversify the academy and bring in all types of individuals. And to do that, the academy has to be in a place to welcome everyone and all of those different tenets of diversity that come with them. So authenticity is important. For the leaders, I say never lose touch with working on the ground for the people that you're trying to help. It can be very easy as a leader to get into a leadership bubble. I know this to be true. You're so busy, you have so much responsibility, and you can sort of get crystallized in the time period for which you first became a leader and think that that is what's most relevant and that's the way that things are moving. But as we all know, graduate education, faculty development, all these things change in the blink of an eye. And we think about even graduate students, we've got the unionization, we have so many things happening in real time. It's so important to give voice and agency to the people that you're trying to help, and to always remember that that's the purpose and sort of the North Star for why we're all doing this work in the first place.
Thank you so much, Sherilynn. All right, JP, what's one thing for trainees and one thing for leaders?
Yeah, one thing for trainees, I think biomedical science really is for the community, right? It's paid for by the community, it's for the community. And in my opinion, the priority is impacting. Are you doing science that's impactful for them? I'd encourage trainees to think about who you want to impact, how and why, and to make sure that you are doing work with the community or individuals rather than for them. One thing for faculty is I would love for them to listen to and prioritize the voices in which they're serving, not just serving, but serving, advising, and mentoring.
Thank you so much. Danielle, what are your recommendations that you would share?
Yeah, for trainees, I would say along the lines of self-compassion, that it's okay for you to be kind to yourself. In an academic environment where we are just immersed in this hypercritical milieu, I feel like it's easy to internalize that and criticize yourself, but it's okay for you to speak kind words into yourself. And then for faculty, I would say it's okay for you to be kind to others, because there's this sort of resounding theme that I've encountered that, a faculty member has gone through a traumatic experience, and so they create that same experience for others. So it's okay for you to be kind to the people that you are mentoring, the people that are under you.
Yeah, great wisdom. Thanks for sharing that. Anna, you're up next. What are your recommendations?
Oh, my advice is same both for trainee and the faculty, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it is self-care is not selfish, it's actually essential. And the reason I say that, for trainees, you have to do well, you have to be at your best self to perform best, whether it be, right, your academic life or science. But for faculty and others as well, if you're too stressed and you're overwhelmed, you're kind of too inward focused to be able to help others, right? You don't have the space to make room to be a great mentor or consider other D&I or civility issues. So in both parties, you need to be able to have the mental capacity and space to do that. And self-care is one way to do that.
Thank you for that wonderful nugget. All right, Tammy, what is your recommendation set?
So I guess I would say keeping an open mind and adaptability, especially for faculty, you know, that things are changing, and being willing to accept the new landscape and support trainees as a holistic person, and understanding the difference between simply being a supervisor and truly being a mentor and a sponsor. For scholars and trainees, you know, I think it's a similar thing, but also thinking about the power of yet. You know, I definitely saw people that, you know, might be going down a certain path, and maybe they hit a roadblock, and so things didn't go as they planned, and you know, they could have immediately pivoted, but if they still really wanted to keep going down that path because they knew that's what they wanted to do, you know, having the mindset of, you know, maybe this just hasn't happened yet and I'll keep going. So.
Love that, the yet mindset. Thank you. T, what are your recommendation nuggets?
For students, I would say, yes, what you want is possible. You got this, and what you want is important. And then for leaders, I would say, show up. I can't tell you the impact I've seen when a PI comes to a workshop or a networking event with their student or postdoc. It means so much that they want to learn, and they also want to talk about how great their team members are. So show up, be there, be present.
Great advice. Thank you. And Caleb, closing us out with the nuggets of advice. What would you like to share?
Hard acts to follow here, but I'll just be quick. For trainees, I would say reflect back on your prior experiences. They're really unique to you, and you've gained a lot of strength and perspective from them that can really guide your path forward and how you contribute to your community. And for faculty, I would say when it comes to providing space and capacity for trainees to really explore their holistic selves, it's important to be able to do that. And some of the ways that they do that may actually contribute to innovations to their research project in ways that you may not have thought of before.
Thank you so much for that great advice as well. So I want to thank our panelists again. If you want to give them a hand or say thank you in chat, thank you all for those wonderful perspectives that you shared. I want to briefly answer one question that showed up in the chat about summaries. Frontiers calls that first stage a summary. It is essentially a long abstract, so you have up to 1,000 words to cover it. And I'm gonna leave it at that, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I think we are gonna go ahead and stop the recording now. If anyone has a moment to stay after, you're more than welcome to ask any additional questions. But thank you everybody so much for being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care now.